A man can lose a piece of land in an afternoon. Losing a brother takes longer, you find out in pieces, over months, like a fence coming down one post at a time. I signed 240 acres of Nebraska cropland over to my own brother with a pen he handed me, in a lawyer's office that smelled like burned coffee, and I did it because he told me it was the only way to protect our mother. 6 months and 11 days later I was standing at the end of the gravel drive I'd walked since I was 4 years old, reading a certified letter that told me I had 30 days to remove my personal property from land that had been in our family since 1911. My name is on that farm's history in 6 places. It was on that deed in none. Welcome to Dark Dad's Revenge. Pull up a chair, get yourself a cup of something warm, and sit with me a while. This one takes some telling. If you've got a story like mine, put it down in the comments. There's more of us than you'd think. And if you'd hit that like button and subscribe, it helps these stories find the people who need to hear them. Here, let me back up. My name is Raymond Kessler. I'm 61 years old. I live in Grand Island, Nebraska, in a gray 2-bedroom on Cedar Street with a garage that's worth more to me than the house. I rebuild engines, small block Chevys mostly, some tractor work, whatever comes through the door, and for 19 years I've coached Little League at Ryder Park, which means half this town's grown men still call me coach at the grocery store. I'm not a smart man in the way people mean when they say smart. I never finished college. I've got maybe $11,000 in savings and a 98K 1500 with 260,000 miles on it that I will drive until one of us dies. And here's my flaw, and I'll say it plain because you're going to watch it cost me everything. I have never once, in my whole life, asked my own family to put a promise in writing. Not once. It felt like an insult. Like checking a man's teeth. I believed that if you needed paper to hold a promise, you didn't have a promise, you had a transaction. I want you to remember that I believe that. Because I don't anymore. I want to tell you about my mother now. Ruth Kessler. 84 years old, 4'11" in her shoes, hands like tree bark from 60 years of tomato plants and hog panels. She raised 2 boys on that farm outside Doniphan, and she did it mostly alone after our dad's heart quit in the cab of a combine in October of 1989. She could pull a calf and be back in the kitchen with cornbread in the oven before the mud dried on her boots. Every Sunday of my adult life, every single one, I drove out to that farmhouse and had lunch with her at a kitchen table with a scorch mark shaped like Iowa where somebody set down a hot pan in 1974. Fried chicken. Green beans with too much bacon. Iced tea so sweet it made your fillings ache. 940 Sundays, give or take. I counted once. That's her. That was always her. And then there's Kurt. My younger brother. 56, sells commercial real estate out of an office in Lincoln, drives a black Yukon Denali he trades in every 3 years, wears the kind of watch that doesn't tell you anything except how much the watch cost. Kurt was the golden one, the one who left, the one who got the degree, the one Mom bragged about at church while I was under a truck in her driveway fixing the thing she'd actually needed fixed. I never resented it. I want you to hear that clean. I was proud of him. When he called, I answered. Without question, without condition, without keeping score. That was my mistake. Not the paper. The not keeping score. Thursday, February 20th, 6:51 in the morning. Mom had a stroke in her kitchen. She got herself to the floor and lay there 4 hours before the mail carrier saw the door standing open. Left side gone. Speech scrambled, then slowly, painfully, coming back. She went to Sunrise Meadows Care Center on Capitol Avenue, and the number they handed us was $6,400 a month. $6,400. She had $19,000 in the bank and a Social Security check that wouldn't cover the parking. Kurt drove in from Lincoln that Saturday. Sat across from me in the cafeteria with a legal pad, and I'll admit it, I was relieved. He knew about money. He knew about the world. He said Medicaid would take the farm. He said the state would put a lien on it, and when she passed, 240 acres of Kessler ground would go to Lincoln and never come back. He said there's a 5-year look back and we had to move now, and the cleanest way, the only way, was to get the land out of her name and into one of ours. I said fine. Put it in yours and mine. Split. And he leaned back and explained patient, the way you explain a thing to a slow child, that 2 owners meant 2 credit profiles, 2 sets of debts, 2 divorces waiting to happen, and that it needed to sit clean under one name, and that with my mechanic's shop and my liability exposure it obviously couldn't be me. He said, and I remember this exactly, Ray, it's a filing cabinet. That's all it is. Nothing changes. You farm it, you live on it, and when mom's gone we split it down the middle like dad wanted. He put his hand on my arm when he said it. Tuesday, March 4th, 10:15 in the morning, at a law office on Locust Street. Mom signed with her good hand, a shaky loop that didn't look like her name. I signed as her power of attorney, waiving whatever needed waiving. The deed went to Kurt Kessler, sole owner. It took 11 minutes. There was a plate of grocery store cookies on the table and nobody touched them. I drove back to the farm that afternoon and disked 40 acres because it was March and there was work to do. That's the part one keep coming back to. I went and did the work. The first thing was small. In April he asked me to email him the yield history and the FSA paperwork. Fine, reasonable. Then in May he wanted a copy of the cash rent agreement with the Novak boys who farm the East Quarter. Fine. Then in June he stopped answering the phone on the first try. Started texting back 4-5 hours later. In a meeting, call you tomorrow, he didn't call tomorrow. In July a man in a white Ford Escape drove up the section road and stood at the fence line for 20 minutes with a tablet. I walked out and asked him if he was lost. He said he was doing a soil survey. I asked for who. He looked at his tablet, looked at me, and said he'd better let the owner explain that. The owner. I want you to understand something about that moment. I didn't get angry. I got quiet. There's a difference and it matters. I stood in that road until his taillights went over the rise and I felt something in my chest go very, very still, the way the air goes still before the sirens. I called Kurt 11 times over the next 9 days. He answered once. He laughed at me. He said I was getting paranoid in my old age, that it was a routine appraisal, that lenders require them, that I should go coach my ball team and let the grown-ups handle the finances. Let the grown-ups handle it. That's the sentence I chewed on all summer. That's the one that was still in my teeth in September. And in August, Mom told me she'd asked Kurt 3 times to bring her out to the farm to sit on the porch one afternoon, and 3 times he'd said he was too busy. She said it like it was nothing. She said, he's got a big life, Raymond. Then she looked at the window for a while. Thursday, September 18th, 7:42 in the morning. Certified letter, Hall County postmark, from a law firm in Omaha I'd never heard of. The land had been sold on August 29 to an agricultural investment group out of Chicago for $1,920,000. I was identified in the letter as an unauthorized occupant. I had 30 days to remove my personal property. My personal property. 40 years of tools. My dad's workbench. The porch swing he hung the summer I turned 9. I sat down on the tailgate of my truck in the driveway and I stayed there a long time. I'm not going to dress that up for you. I'm a 61-year-old man and I sat on a tailgate and cried like a kid with a busted knee, and then I got up and I went inside and I made coffee. Because there was nothing else to do at 7:50 in the morning but make coffee. Then I called Arnie Voss. Arnie's farmed the ground across the road for 31 years. 73 years old, hearing aids in both ears, has told me the same 3 jokes since the Clinton administration. I didn't ask him for anything. I just told him what happened, because I needed to say it out loud to somebody who knew the shape of that land. Arnie was quiet for maybe 4 seconds. Then he said, Ray. Don't sign anything, don't move anything, and don't call your brother. I'm coming over. He was in my driveway in 11 minutes with a shoebox. 31 years of his own farm records, and in that box, because Arnie Voss is the kind of man who writes things down, a page from a spiral notebook dated March 2nd, 2 days before I signed, where he'd noted that Kurt Kessler had stopped by his place asking what the ground was going for an acre and whether Arnie knew any buyers out of state. 2 days before. Before I ever picked up the pen. Arnie set that notebook on my kitchen table and said, he was shopping it before he owned it, Ray. That ain't a filing cabinet. That's a plan. If you've been listening for a while, do us one quick favor. Subscribe, it costs you nothing and it means everything to us. Hit that like button and drop your thoughts in the comments. It helps more than you know. Now, here's where the story turns. I could have driven to Lincoln that afternoon. 2 hours on I-80 and I'd have been standing in that office with his coffee cup in my hand, and I'll be honest with you, I thought about it the whole night. But I'd been under enough machinery to know one thing about a stuck bolt: if you jerk on it, you snap the head off, and then you've got nothing left to grab. You go slow. You get the right tool. You apply steady pressure until the thing gives. So I did the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. Nothing. For 8 days I did nothing but write. Every conversation, every date, every text, every voicemail, in a spiral notebook from the Dollar General, in pen, with the times. Then on Monday, September 29th, I walked into the office of Denise Alvarado on 3rd Street. 26 years doing property and probate law in central Nebraska. She read for 40 minutes without saying one word. Then she took her glasses off and said, "Mr. Kessler, tell me exactly what he promised you and exactly who was standing there when he promised it." Patience. I want to say that word again, because it's the only reason I'm telling you this from the good side of it. Patience is not weakness. Patience is a man loading a trailer properly instead of losing the load on the highway. Rage is loud and it's fast and it's useless, and it would have handed my brother the only thing that could have saved him: a picture of me being the crazy one. Here is what patience got us, over the next 11 weeks. It got us a lease pendens, a notice filed with the Hall County Register of Deeds on October 6 that told the entire world this title was in dispute. That single sheet of paper froze the closing. The Chicago buyers had a due diligence window and clean title was a condition, and clean title was now a bonfire. It got us Arnie's notebook, and the sworn affidavit of a man with 31 years of standing in that county. It got us Mom's neurologist's notes from February 24, which described her comprehension as significantly impaired, dated 8 days before she signed. It got us Kurt's own text messages, which he never thought to delete, including one from March 1 where he'd written to a realtor in Kearney, "Should have full control by the 4th, brothers on board, he doesn't ask questions, he doesn't ask questions." And then it got us the thing none of us went looking for. Denise brought in a forensic accountant named Paul Metzger, quiet fella, half glasses, ate the same turkey sandwich every day of that deposition, and Paul pulled Mom's bank records back 4 years. Between 2021 and that February, $31,400 had moved out of Ruth Kessler's account in withdrawals authorized by a power of attorney she'd signed for Kurt in 2019. A POA I never knew existed. Cash. Transfers. A Denali down payment. He hadn't started stealing when she got sick. He'd started stealing when she got old. He'd just been waiting on the land. The payoff didn't come with any shouting. It came on Wednesday, February 11th, at 9:30 in the morning, in a courtroom in Hall County with maybe 9 people in it, and it came in a judge's flat, bored, beautiful voice. The sale was voided. The court imposed what they call a constructive trust, meaning the law looked at that deed and said out loud what everybody in the room already knew: this land was never his. It went back to a trust in our mother's name, with me as trustee. The buyers walked, and their attorneys went after Kurt for their costs and their broken escrow. He was ordered to repay the $31,400, plus our legal fees, plus interest. And the file went across the hall to the county attorney, because taking money out of an 84-year-old woman's account with a power of attorney has a name in the Nebraska statutes, and the name is felony exploitation of a vulnerable adult. He lost the license he sold real estate with. He lost the house in Lincoln by June. Last I heard, the Denali went back to the dealer. No violence. Not one raised hand. Just paper, and time, and the truth, filed in the correct order. He caught me in the parking lot after. Half jogging, tie loose, calling my name across the wet asphalt like we were kids and he'd been left behind. He said, Ray, come on. You know I was going to take care of you." And I stood there, 61 years old, in my one good jacket, and I felt the strangest thing come over me. It wasn't triumph. It was a kind of terrible peace. because I had nothing left to protect. He had already taken it, the land, the trust, the brother, and there was nothing in my hands for him to reach for anymore. I didn't raise my voice. I have not raised my voice at that man since we were 9 and 11 years old. I said, Kurt, you had 198 days between the day I signed and the day I got that letter. Any one of them, you could have called me. You didn't call me because you weren't afraid of me. You were right not to be. And then I said, you should have been afraid of the paperwork. He looked at me like he was waiting for the rest of it. Some yelling. Some fight he'd know how to win. There wasn't any rest of it. I got in my truck and I drove home. Mom passed on the 9th of May. She spent her last 2 months back at the farmhouse, in her own bed, with the window open and the smell of turned earth coming through it, and 11 days before she died she had Denise come out and she signed a new will with a hand that shook so hard it took her 90 seconds to write Ruth. The land goes to my grandson Cole when he's 25. Kurt's name is in that document exactly once, in the line where she names the people who are to receive nothing. She wasn't angry when she signed it. That's the part one think about. She just looked out the window at the fence line and said, well. He knew what he was doing. Kurt didn't come to the funeral. I don't believe he could have found the road. I still drive out there most Sundays. Sit on my dad's swing. The Novak boys are farming the east quarter and the ground's in good shape, and there's a scorch mark on the kitchen table shaped like Iowa that I will never, ever sand out. My brother knew every soft place I had. He knew I'd sign whatever he put in front of me, because he'd known me for 56 years and he'd never once in that time seen me say no to him. He knew my signature. He never knew my spine. If you enjoyed this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of Dad's Raw Revenge. I'll see you on the next.